there. All right, last day. And today, as yesterday, our focus is on the upper grades 3rd through 6th. And today, the plan is to talk about blending, to talk about morphology, to talk about how we marry morphology, phonology, and orthography, the spelling rule together as we learn to spell words. And we're going to practice decoding longer words. Now, we know that speech to print, yay, hey, Jackie, thanks for joining us. We know that speech to print is the way the brain is wired, and we should take advantage of it. But as we're working, we also have to go print to speech. A couple of the very old OG programs were entirely speech to print. And that meant that it was the writing road to reading. In order to read, you had to teach the writing. And the premise was that if you could spell the word, you're going to be able to read a word. That was the premise back then. And we now know that it primarily works because the brain is wired for speech. And so going from speech to print is the more efficient pathways of connecting everything together. However, with those old programs, we have to recognize that you can't learn to spell every word, right? We need that orthographic mapping. We need that self-teaching that comes into play when all the pieces work together, and then you're able to read words that you've never read before. And we also know that it takes practice. Okay? So we need to give the explicit instruction for those students for whom it doesn't just happen. Explicit instruction hurts nobody, and it helps everybody. So we might as well do it, okay? It helps even those who naturally learn to read well. Still, the explicit instruction helps. But, you know, in working with the systems that were the writing and spelling in order to learn to read, there were a couple of major flaws in that if you don't teach a student how to syllabicate, they can learn how to spell the word because you have now pronounced it correctly for them. But when they go to look at the word, they don't recognize it as the word that they had learned how to spell. So you have to have that bidirectional practice going on in your brain. And the truth is that many of our students, if they see a word that's above 5 or 6 letters, maybe 8 letters, their brain just shuts down and says, I can't process that, just the way I would if I were to look at a 10-digit phone number without the breaks in it. It's like, oh, I don't remember that number. I don't know whose number that is, right? So, but by segmenting, we allow our brains to process smaller chunks, and we can then say, oh yeah, I know that number. That's my husband's number or my daughter's number or so-and-so. In any case, so we want to give students that ability to chunk it. We're going to look just as a really quick kind of fun exercise at a very famous poem written by Lewis Carroll. How many of you are familiar with the Jabberwocky? Or sorry, it's not the Jabberwocky, but the poem Jabberwocky. Are any of you familiar with Lewis Carroll's Jabberwocky? Okay, yes. So he wrote Alice in Wonderland, and we know the guy was a little bit weird, right? If anyone who can write Alice in Wonderland, and we do know more things about him as well. But in any case, it's only the first 2 stanzas of his poem. And we've never spelled these words before. We're going to have to read them. Okay? So let's take a couple of seconds and read over it for yourself, and then we're going to see how we reading it out loud, okay? And what kind of meaning we've got from this. How are you feeling right now? Some of you are like, I got this. I can read this, no problem. In that first stanza, if you've never read this before, there are several words that you've never seen before. How is your fluency going to be as you read this aloud? Who would like to demonstrate lovely fluency with this first stanza? Anyone? Okay. This is what our kids face. This is what our kids face. When we put something in front of them and we've not given them the ability to segment and blend smoothly, and we've not given them the content of knowing how to do it, plus also the practice in doing it, so that portion of the brain that has to connect the letters to the sounds and putting them together to come out smoothly, we're not going to have lovely fluency, are we? How's our comprehension? How's our comprehension?
Not there.
Not there, right? Okay. This is what our students face. This is what our students face. Now, we can analyze this. We can analyze this and we can get some comprehension from it, but it takes a lot of analysis and it takes a lot of cognitive power. Now, when we put reading passages in front of our students, and they have to look at the reading passage as we are looking at Jabberwocky, how do you think they feel?
Overwhelmed.
Yeah. And we sit there and say, oh, you can do it. You know how to do this. And we're saying that because we know those. We look at them and we say, oh, yeah, those words are easy to decode. Just do it. Just go for it. Just sound it out. And yet there's so many things that are happening in your brain as you're trying to attack this. It feels overwhelming. Okay, just very quickly. 'Twas brillig and the slithy toves did probably gyre and gimble in the wave. All mimsy were the borogoves and the mome raths outgrave. Beware the jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the dub-dub bird, and shun the frumious bandersnatch. Oh my goodness, I blew it on that one. Okay, in any case, if we were going to ask our, the way most of us learn to teach using the cueing system of, okay, well, let's look at this. What was the picture? What did it refer to? And then you get up into third, fourth, fifth grade, and there aren't very many pictures anymore. And that's what they're relying on. And all they have is the context to give them the clues to what the different words are. We've overwhelmed our students. What many of our students face hour after hour, day after day after day. And I have to tell you, I get tired doing this, right? And now I can say by context, 'twas brillig. Okay, so 'twas, that reminds me of 'twas the night before Christmas, so it's probably a time reference. So brillig must be some kind of time reference. And the slithy toves. Okay, toves must be a noun. Slithy must be an adjective. Did gyre and gimble in the wave. So in the wave is a noun, I can tell because it's at the end of a prepositional phrase. So probably a place. And gyre and gimble must be verbs, so they must be actions. All mimsy were the borogoves. I see the word the, so borogoves must be a noun because it's coming after the, so it'd be a noun. And so mimsy must be another adjective. And the mome raths outgrave. My guess is that raths is the noun, mome is an adjective, and outgrave must be a verb. Okay? I'm pretty good at doing this, but you can imagine our kids have a harder time. I mean, I've taught literature and English grammar. So, but I'm going to ask you, so I just said outgrabe is a verb. Anyone want to tell me what tense it is? Okay, we're all teachers and we struggle, right? So our students that don't have the connection of sound to symbol, the ability to put them together and then to segment, put it together, and then connect it to meaning. Now, of course, they don't have a meaning to connect it to. And I get that. So that's where the analogy breaks a little. But what I'm trying to show is, as difficult as this is for us, this is what our students face all day long when they don't have the ability to use those foundational tools to recognize that the letters are representing sounds, that they can segment the sounds, they can put the sounds together. And if all they have is context, how hard is it to work with context? How hard is it for us to work purely with context here?
Difficult.
Yeah. So do you see what I'm saying? Is that when we don't give the kids the tools and all they're doing is working with context to try to figure out what these words are, that's how we feel right now looking at this. And we want to prevent that. Okay. We don't want them to have to rely just on the context, just on the cues within the context to derive meaning. It's a difficult process. Let's give them those foundational tools. In any case, I'm going to just go ahead and say that outgrade must be past tense because I see that did is past tense. Did, gyre, and gimble. So past tense verb. Okay, so is it a regular verb or irregular verb? It's irregular because it didn't have an ed, right? And it doesn't have a helping verb with it, like did, gyre, and gimble. Okay. Oh, and were was also past tense. We see the were there is past tense. We know that verb must be past tense. It's an irregular verb. But oh my goodness, would we want to do this all day long? Let's not do this to our students. Let's give them the foundational tools. Okay? That is a lot of cognitive power. And we wonder why kids don't like to read. If this is what I had to read all the time, and I had to figure out context and figure out meaning based on context, I'd be exhausted. No wonder our kids don't enjoy reading. So let's give them all the tools that we can in order to help them. Let's not say, well, look at the context, you can figure it out. Or, you know, what is the context telling you? Now, there are times when we have to do that. And the context is really, really important to give us nuances, to give us connotation, to help us figure out the tone of the author is using. And so we do need to use context and we do need to teach that. But let's not make a student rely on context to just figure out what the words are. Because the way we feel looking at this, that's the way they feel all day long. Okay. That was my example here. And yesterday, I don't think I got to show this well, so I just wanted to bring it up. And it's in the site. So here we talked about history of the English language. So this is the main part in here where the Anglo-Saxon words come into play, the Old English, and the Anglo-Saxon words, the ones that are the crazy words. And then we have the French and Latin influence because the nobility at this time in England spoke Latin. They were French, they spoke Latin, so that's where a lot of that came into our language. And then we have more influences here. And then here, these spellings, oops. Oh no, back up. So all of these odd spellings in here, which I can't point to because it brings up the thing. All of these odd spellings on the lower left, That's all because of those old Anglo-Saxon words. And because these words are the common words, 80% of our language, daily language, especially our oral language, as a young child, are going to be these old words that have the awful spellings. So it's tough to put the onus of these really, difficult spellings on our youngest children, but that's what our language does. But if we can get them through to understand the language in those primary grades, the Latin, French, and Greek is actually much easier. Okay, so I know I didn't get to show that well yesterday because things weren't loading. So let's take that away. Yeah. All right, so today we are going to talk about decoding multisyllabic words. But one of the steps along the way is to be able to blend. So remember, if we think about the things we absolutely have to be able to do to read, we have to know that words are made up of sounds. We have to know that sounds are represented by letters bidirectionally, and letters represent sounds, and that letters can represent more than one sound, and one sound can be represented in many spelling combinations. So we have to have that piece of information. We have to be able to segment the sounds in a word. We have to be able to pull them apart, right? Just as we were doing with both our phonological and phonemic awareness activities. And then also, as we talked about orthographic mapping, we have to be able to pull the sounds apart, segment the sounds. The other thing we need to do is we have to blend the sounds. We have to be able to say, these letters represent sounds. I've got to put the sounds together. So someone had asked a question earlier in the week about nonsense words. And what I'd like to say about nonsense words is that every word a child meets for the first time and looks at is a nonsense word. If they don't know it, it's a nonsense word to them. And it may be a word that they just don't know yet. So, and most of the syllables we meet in multisyllabic words, that syllable by itself is a nonsense word. If the student can't put together those sounds in that syllable, they're not going to read the whole word. So we have to be able to put together sounds, even if that syllable doesn't necessarily make sense. So when I use the metaphor of sports and I say, okay, the goal is to play a game or to do a dance or whatever it is, if you're going to play tennis, the goal is to play tennis. You don't go out onto the court and bring out your weights and do bicep curls, right? You don't go out into the court. Well, they do before the game where they practice doing a few serves and a few volleys and blah, blah, blah. And they practice their toss and then they serve and whatnot before the game. But if the goal is the game, they don't do that practice during the game. But those things have to happen. That practice has to happen. The strength training has to happen in order for you to be a good tennis player or football player or basketball or whatever it is you're going to do. You need the content of knowing how to play it. You need the practice of doing the things you're going to do again and again and again so that you're developing that muscle memory or the brain muscle memory. You need the practice. You want it to become automatic so you don't have to think about it. It's like, okay, how high do I toss the ball when I'm going to serve? You want it to happen automatically. And you want to have the strength to do what you need to do. So you hit the weight room, right? And you strengthen your muscles. Reading is much the same. We have to have the content. We have to know those letter-sound relationships. We have to know some of the spelling rules. So we have to have the content. We have to have the drill. We have to practice putting sounds together. So that's both practice and it's muscle building. So in practice, sometimes, you're building up your muscle for endurance, right? We have to have the strength training. And for me, the strength training is like doing the phonemic awareness activities. That is just building the muscle. That's helping you become stronger. So part of the practice we're going to do is practice putting sounds together. We're going to practice blending. We have to teach to blend and we have to practice blending. You want both. We do not want students who will go it, rit. We want them to look at that and say rit all in one time without thinking about the fact that they are having to identify the sounds the letters represent and put the sounds together. Now, they might have to start with thinking sound by sound, but we want them to get to where it just happens. Wav. There, just like that, without thought. That they've recognized that these letters represent sounds. They put the sounds together as quickly as that. Because if they can't do that quickly, how are they going to attend to an 8-letter, 10-letter, 12-letter word? If they're having to go, what was the word we did? It's like we can't do it, right? You can't go letter by letter. We have to be able to segment, and then within that segment, just blend the letters together with automaticity. So for our very beginning students, I shouldn't say our very beginning students, our students who have only learned to recognize words by visual memory. And we have many students who've memorized thousands of words and they by visual memory alone, but have no idea how to put the sounds together in an unfamiliar word. Like the 3rd grader who told me she couldn't read Gull because no one ever taught her that word. Okay, well, you've used the sounds a million times, but every word she had ever read was one that she had been taught and learned as a picture, just the way we would say that's a glasses, and this is a protractor and this is a keyboard, whatever. So every word that she learned was just a picture to her of an object. And I've seen 5th graders and it's like, man, this kid knows a bazillion words, but couldn't put together 3 sounds of an unfamiliar word. So from 3rd grade on up, mostly we have trouble with kids that they've learned sight words, but they don't realize that what's happening is they have to put sounds together. So they have to learn the sounds and they have to learn to put them together. And some of them can't even tell you the sounds that these letters represent when they're seeing it out of the context of a real word. So they don't know, what sound am I going to use here? And they'll say woov. Well, it's okay. The O can say ooh sometimes, but we need to give them the content. So that's where those rules that we talked about very quickly yesterday, some of the rules that if a syllable ends with a consonant, the vowel will use its short sound. So it's like, okay, so every time we do this, it's like, okay, the syllable is ending with a consonant. The vowel has to use its short sound. What's the short sound here? And we want them to be able to identify that they will use the ah sound. So in the students that don't know how to put sounds together, I use this process. I teach them, don't let anything come out of your mouth until you have put at least the first 2 sounds together. And I might say the first 2 sounds, but what I'm really saying is through the vowel. I want them to get through the vowel. Because you can, remember the vowels being the breath, you can stretch your vowel as you think about adding on your 3rd sound. You can't always stretch your first letter. Like a S is a consonant is a continuant consonant, and it means that you can kind of hold the S. But you can't hold a B. How long can you hold the B sound? But it pops, that's it. You can't hold it. So if we just teach our kids to blend through the vowel and then add on the other letters, it helps the blending process happen faster. So we would say, I see that's a S and that's a F, but don't say it until we get it out together. Sev. And if I'm doing it visually with a book in front, I just cover up the last part so they don't see it, because I can tell you from experience that what kids will do is they'll try to say sev, sev. It's like, wait, we're not doing that anymore. We're going to say sev, but we have to teach them how to do that. So I will say, I know you see this, and I want you to think this, and I want you to think the ah, but don't let anything come out of your mouth until you have it put together and you say sap. And by hiding part of the syllable, they're not tempted to just say the sight word or a word that they think it looks like. I'm forcing them to put sounds together so that they're aware that they are putting sounds together. If they don't need this, if they look at those others syllables and can put it together, I don't go through this process. But any student that is having trouble with that, every syllable is a s, n, a, ch, n, a, ch, snatch. If they're doing that, they need to learn to blend continuously to free up working memory. So, with our younger students and any student who's still learning this, we have a finite working memory, and working memory is one of the greatest indicators of success, not only in reading, but in a lot of things in life. The ability to hold things in your memory and use it. And one of the measures they use is a digit span. Like if you just look at a series of numbers, how many numbers can you easily remember and rattle back? And the average adult is about 7 digits, which is why phone numbers, when it gets beyond 7 digits, you have to segment, because you can't any longer do 2621902, 8384726, and then just rattle it back. We have to segment. A child's working memory is less than that. So if they are reading each word sound by sound, each sound is a separate piece that they have to hold in their working memory. And if you do that to one word, and then you do it to the next word, and then you do it to the third word, they've forgotten what they're reading, because they are attending to too many little pieces of information along the way. So you want to give them the ability to make this into one piece of information. So this isn't sap, but it's sap. And it's one piece of information, not 3. Okay. So if our students need to break it down, hiding the rest of the word after the vowel and then letting them drop it on is easier. And it's easier to say, I can give hand motions. And I can say, okay, think it, now put it together. And I'll say, fit, and then we just are going to drop on, because any consonant at the end, you can just drop on, right? It doesn't take blending power. So we say, fit, and just drop it on. So sometimes the hand motion of keep this together and then stick it on helps the students. So we want them to be able to put the sounds together. And if they're going through this level and they say does and Liz or Liz, I don't care which, or yas or yas, whatever acceptable sounds this one might make, but I want to hear that this is the short vowel sound, particularly as we get into our multisyllabic words. Multisyllabic words, 90% of them after third grade are Latin influenced. They are so regular in that the vowels will almost always use the short sound if the syllable ends with a consonant. That's like, it's gold. So I want to hear, can they consistently use the short sound here? Do they know the sounds? Can they consistently put it together? And once we do that, we can then put on, digraphs and blends. Wesp. Are they saying wesp? Or are they having to say, I don't know, we and then what they'll often do is leave out this consonant here in a blend, right? So we say, oh wait, syllable ends with the consonant, the vowels uses the short sound. So, and if I need to, and I've made these boards where I hide this here. One of the things I'll do sometimes is, sorry, that I'm just demonstrating. Zoom has an easy way of doing it. Google Meet does not have an easy way of hiding. So I just use a separate tab and I hide it. I actually use a blank tab, but you get the idea. So it's like, okay, here, let's put that part together. And we know that in working with students that it's the second letter of an initial blend or the first letter of a final blend that will mess them up. So I want them to actually see it. Okay, put it together. And once they have that together, then I'll show the last one. West. So by hiding it using an extra tab here, I can do it. And I have built some where it hides it, but for the most part, once students learn how to blend, it's only an occasional issue with the consonant blends that happen at the beginning, at the end. And then I just hide it piece by piece to go. So I want them to be able to say west and pult. Okay. So we want to give them the drill work. Just as you would throw 1,000 serves before you go and play your game, because you want that to happen automatically, right? Anything we want to do well, we practice. And we practice so it becomes automatic. This is a thing that we practice to get to automaticity. So when we talk about working with kids and we say, okay, well, these things happen maybe at different rates, but simultaneously. We don't just say, I'm only going to work on phonological awareness, and then I'll work on phonics, and then I'll work on, segmenting and blending. A lot of these things we can work on simultaneously, because what student can sit there and say, yeah, it takes 12 hours to get better in phonological awareness. I'm going to do 12 hours all in, one go before I learn anything else. They would die, right? So couple of minutes of this, couple of minutes of this, couple of minutes of this, couple of minutes of this. So we can build all the skills. We recognize they have to have the foundational, but kids can't do 3 hours of phonics and have retention. It's like brain's on overload. So if you do phonological awareness, phonics, blending and segmenting, a little bit of each, we have better retention and better transfer and utilization. So if our students are blending, then it's like, okay, how are they doing with initial blends, fuzz, and are they able to put these together and spuff, whatever. And then where they have blends at the beginning, at the end, and then I have ones here, just as we would as with wordlets. Are they blending with R controlleds well? Because some of our kids have trouble with the R controlleds, the AR, ER, IR, OR, UR, EAR, whatever's. Some of our students have trouble with that, so sometimes they need just a little extra help. A lot of our students, they get to blending well, but now we need to say they aren't really very familiar with these vowel teams. So I will pick 3 or 4 vowel teams, or 5, whatever that we're practicing, and we'll practice this. So if this student is here, if you come to a multisyllabic word you don't know, you have to be able to quickly try out the various sounds of these letter teams to see which one makes a real word, right? Is it yield or yield? Oh, you'd say, oh, it's yield. Okay, you connect the combination to a word in your memory. Now, so I give them the practice of interchanging the sounds that they're learning. So knees, knies. Now, this doesn't happen to be a real word, but I'm giving them the skill and practice in interchanging possible sounds that this might make, so that they're able to say, as they're reading, it happens quickly, and they can say, oh, they know what the word is, because their mind has tried out the various combinations of possible sounds. So is it weak or wike? So I want them to say weak, wike. Now, if I only have 20 minutes in intervention, I might not get to automaticity here, because that might not be the highest priority. If I'm working with a student longer term, I will do this. But the minimum is they need to be familiar with the sounds, the phonics aspect of it, the sounds that these letter teams make. And if I can have the time, I want them to be able to interchange the sounds with rapidity, so that they can not take too long as they're reading in context to figure out what that word was, right? And then, of course, I'll have silent E practice. And a lot of our students learned about the silent E in first grade and second grade, and they learned specific words. And then they come to third, fourth, fifth grade, and they forget that what the E does to the vowel happens in multisyllabic words. So they come to the word mistake, and they can't read the word mistake because they don't remember that the E makes the A say A, or whatever, compute. And it's like, oh, no one taught me that word. I haven't learned that word yet. Well, they didn't learn to read compute in second grade, but the skills that they learned in second grade have to transfer into third grade, fourth grade, and beyond, right? So a lot of times our instruction is too narrow focused, and we would like the foundational grades to be more longer term, so that the students are able to recognize that it's a skill that's applicable not just in those specific words, but in all the words that they're going to come to down their life. Some kids get it. Some kids have to be explicitly taught that. And so let's teach them. So like E makes the O say O, this is yod. And E makes the U say use, so this is suit. Whatever, as we go through these. So by working in these syllables that may be meaningless at this point, it allows them to have that skill to when they come to words that they haven't been taught. Okay? So blending as a skill is very helpful. It's crucial. Blending to automaticity is what we would like to see. We don't want kids to have to, every time they come to a new word, say s, e, mimsy, or the borogoves. Okay, what's a borogove? Okay, so that was the S at the end. So the syllable was gove. Did I have to say g o, e making the O say O, and boro? You know, it's like, what did we do? Um, so we want that putting the sounds together to happen with automaticity. Okay, so this is a kind of drill that we do, and it helps students. Remember the goal, so it blends together smoothly. This is the goal here, is not just to teach the sound. So, but if the student doesn't know the sound, you have to tell them the sound. But the real goal of doing this is to get them to practice putting the sounds together. Okay. If you would unmute for a second, and are there any questions about why we do this, how we can accomplish this, the necessity for it, anything?
Drills.
Yeah. So for years and years, I would make blending books. I would just take books, slice them up, and flip. And I got where I printed the books and bound the books, and I did all those things. It's like, this takes forever. There's got to be a way to do it digitally. So I had made my digital blending long before COVID shut us down. So I already had it, and it was easier to, I'm going to carry my around with me anyway, or my iPad with me anyway. So digital was the way to go. But books worked. I used these for years with students, just slicing up a notebook and doing the pages. But you have access to this digital blending board. It's in the resources that are in the site that I gave you yesterday. And you can make your own copy, and I will show you at some point how you can adjust it for any student. Like, for instance, you can see I made a copy here for a student, a couple of students here, because this student is working on very specific sounds, and this student is working on very specific sounds. And I just copy either the whole spreadsheet or one sheet of it to practice what I need for that student. And if a student has not learned certain sounds, I only put in the sounds that that student has learned, so I can practice blending with those sounds. It's digital. It's just a few kilobytes of memory. I can make as many copies as I like. I actually prefer to make a separate copy of the file per student, because the more sheets I have going, I'm almost afraid, is that slowing me down? If I have, like 35 sheets in this one spreadsheet. So I just make a copy of the whole file, get rid of what I don't need, and just use what I need for that student. But you have access to this, and you can copy it and use it, and I will show you how to modify it for your students. And, someone just came out, the M.A. Rooney Foundation. M.A. Rooney Foundation, they do literacy. They just built a professional blending board. And it's what I would have liked to have done, because it's like, I built this, but it's not pretty. But it worked for me, and I thought, oh, okay, maybe I'll learn how to code so I can build an app that'll do it. And it's like, nope, this works. I'm just sticking with pretty. So they just came out within this last month with their blending board, where you can do the same thing and say, I want to change out these sounds. What they don't have is the ability to hide portions of it and open it up. But you can do that just the way I did, with using a window to cover a portion of the screen. So theirs is lovely, and I'm kind of jealous that they did such a nice job. Like, I wanted to do that, but I would have made it so that you could hide and just open it. But they did it. It's a wonderful resource. Okay, but this one is free. Copy it, use it however you like. Any questions about the need for this or seeing why it's useful for our students?
I had a question about when you start doing the combination of consonants together. Do you practice the blends with the student first, like FL says full or TH
I
says?
don't. A TH, yes. So there's a difference between a digraph and a blend. A digraph is like a TH or an SH or a WH or a PH or an EA or, any of the vowel digraphs. Digraphs are letters that work together to make one sound, a new sound, right? So they work together. The TH says, but in the FL, you have two distinct sounds. Ooh. Now, my view is that we have so many things that we're trying to teach the students, 44 English sounds, a bazillion combinations to make those sounds, however many spelling rules that we're going to be teaching them, all these other pieces of content that we're going to have to teach them. I prefer to give kids the skill of putting the sounds together. So the skill is when you see a FLECK, can you blend fleck? I don't want them to have to memorize. This says fl. They have so much that they're memorizing anyway, especially since you're doing it down at the first grade level. There is so much to memorize. It's too much. Now, as I say that, I know that there's very large companies that teach that, very large schools of thought that are reputable that teach that. I disagree. That's my personal view, is that give them the skill to put sounds together. Don't overwhelm their memory any more than we have to, because we're already asking them to learn so much content. And the problem is when kids don't hear it. So if they don't hear that the "l" contains two sounds, and if you say, what are the sounds you hear in Flint, and they say it, okay, so that's a different issue. That is more of the phonological or phonemic awareness. It's like, okay, let's really hear the sounds. We have to teach that segmenting. So we can do things that will help them. Okay, did I say it or did I say flit? Listen again, was it fi? What you have here is I, but I'm saying flit. Which sound do we need to put in there? There's a sound hiding in there, whatever. So we want them to hear it, be aware of it, and we want them to blend it. So remember segmenting and blending? So we want both skills, and I personally won't teach where they have to memorize, FL, flu, GL, because there's, I forget how many initial blends, 30 some initial blends and almost as many ending blends. It's like, wait, we've already asked them to memorize however many actual sounds that are sound correspondences. So for me, that's a skill in blending. Any other question on this part? Great. Okay. So yesterday, I talked about, just very quickly gave an introduction saying that we would address morphology today. Morphology, ology is the study of morph, just like, morph. What's that character that the superhero and he morphs? I don't remember, but the kids say, "Oh yeah, I know the word morph. It's so and so, and he morphs." It's like, oh, okay, good. But morph means to change, right? So morphology is the study of how the word meanings change, and it's based on morphemes. It is the smallest unit that changes meaning. So the difference between dog and dogs is the morpheme S that represents more than one. The difference between run and running is the morpheme ing that means what you do. So morphemes are the smallest units that have meaning. They may or may not be prefixes. They may or may not be root words. Some words are base words. Sorry, they may not be base words, like run. Run is a base. Ing is a suffix, and we added to run to make running. As we get up into the upper grades, we have bases that can't sit. Sorry, we have roots. My tongue's getting mixed up today. We have roots that can't stand alone. So if I say the root is cred, we don't, okay, I know that's slang now when people say, oh yeah, you've got cred. Okay, but the actual root cred is a root word, a Latin root that means to believe. And from it, we have credit. We have credible, we have incredible, we have credulous, and we have many other words where the root is cred, meaning to believe. So if I give you credit for an assignment, it's because I believe you did it, right? And I once had a student who gave me an assignment, and I thought, wow, this kid's writing has really improved. Oh my goodness. I thought, wait a second. And of course I put, this was years ago, I put it through, and it's like, yeah, he copied it word for word out of an essay he found on the internet. And I said, I can't give you credit for it because I don't believe that this is your work. He says, but I was the one who found it. Okay, you get credit for your research skills. You do not get credit for the assignment. All right, but in any case, to give someone credit means I believe they did it, right? And when you have a credit card, it's because they believe you're going to pay it back. So, but cred does not exist by itself. Just as miss does not exist by itself. So you may omit something, you might permit something, you might emit light, you might submit something, but mit does not exist by itself. It has to live with the other pieces. So when we study morphology and we look at morphemes, what we're trying to do is unlock the world of greater vocabulary and recognition of word parts to a student. And I think I gave the example yesterday of commit. If we only think about the sounds of words, I will commit a crime. I don't hear two M's, do I? Commit. But when we think of our prefix, com means together, and mit means brain fart, put or place. So if I put it together by recognizing the prefix and the root, there's two M's. So we can open up vocabulary, but we also will help with their spelling. And then we will also help with their reading as they start to see these word parts in a word, right? So it's a door that opens up, and we initially start teaching it in the very primary grades where we tell them to add a S, or we tell them to add the ED or the ing, and those are inflectional endings that just doesn't change the tense of the word. So run and running is the same tense, but credit can be a verb or a noun, and incredible is an adjective. So as we get into older grades, these derivational changes allows you to use words as nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, wherever, and it opens up vocabulary and meaning to kids that it'd be really hard pressed to teach them otherwise. And I see word lists, like this word list has the word admitted on it. Because that was in a story, whatever. He admitted that he did something, whatever. Like, okay, so are you going to teach them that you now know the word admitted? Or do we want to open up and say, well, you could admit, you can have an emission, or you might have an omission, and give them the parts that help open up even more vocabulary. So do we teach one word, or do we teach them the tools to open up much more is the question. So whenever we as teachers have the ability to show them relationships so that they can expand their knowledge and their ability to read and understand and then spell, all of those aspects with one set of tools, we should use those tools. So that's morphology, the study of the parts that change the meanings in the words. So for most of our students, we can start with suffixes, and I'll tell you why we start with suffixes. They're used to using suffixes in the primary grades. They're used to adding an S onto a word. They're used to adding an ED or an ING onto a word. And down in second grade, they're also used to working with that for spelling. So they've been taught that they have to double the T before you add your vowel suffix, or, you know, double the last consonant. Or there, in these words, you have to drop the E before you add the suffix. So they are taught some of those rules. So there's that familiarity. So working with suffix is kind of the logical next step as we go into the upper grades, giving them the familiarity with suffixes, and then giving them, showing them how they impact the words that we're going to read. So, and many of us have taught suffixes just using flashcards like anything else, paired associate learning. This is the suffix, here's the meaning. Here's another suffix, here's the meaning. And it's hard to learn 20 and 30 suffixes that way. You can do it. I think the more that they have exposure to it, the more repetitions in a way that allows them to think about it, the better. And we know with kids that if you put anything into a game, you have less resistance, right? And there was actually a study that someone quoted, and I can't find the quote, I just know that she quoted it, saying that you can learn 40, students tend to learn up to 40 times, 20 to 40 times faster by using the same material in a game than if they do it just with paired associate learning, like flashcards. And something about creating that experience of the game, that emotional experience of playing it in a game, and the fact that it's not the, one more thing I have to do, aids in retention. So I've never found the actual quote. I just know who quoted it. So I can't give you that, but that's what's been floating around. And so I'm going to show you a game, and we're going to play a game. So if you would all present. And this is one I can do in small group. So if you would unmute yourself, and we're going to play a game, just as a demonstration of how I might work with this with my students. We're playing concentration. And you all have the ability to call out a number. Okay, and we're going to find matches. These are suffixes. And as I initially do it, I will do as much teaching as I can, but I want to elicit response from my students. So if it's a suffix you absolutely don't know, I'm going to tell you what it's doing, and I'm going to ask you to come up with extra words. If it's a suffix you know, go ahead and tell me words that, you know, at least one word that uses that suffix. So just as a demonstration, I will start and say, I'm turning over 1 and 2. Oh, so this suffix S is in words like precious and delicious, and it makes words into adjectives. This suffix ion, and we often see it as a tion, sion, makes words into nouns like nation, action, competition. Okay, so I might teach, and I want them to try to bring out from their memory where they've seen it before, because the more we can connect one to the other, the better they're able to say, oh yeah, I know that one. And then they'll start to see it in more words. Okay. Lori, can you call out some numbers, please? What would you like?
9 and 9.
Sorry, 9 and
4.
I didn't hear you.
4.
9 and 4. The suffixes are able, able. This one means able to. Can you think of an example?
Edible.
Yes, that means I'm able to eat it. And I think you are lovable and you are able to be loved. And this task is doable. We are able to do it. This is itty, and we might see this in words like community, activity. Can you think of any other words? If
Clarity.
something is, yes, good job. Something that is clear. Something that's clear means that you have clarity. Sorry. Good. Kayleen.
3 and 5.
Do you want me to take 5? Go ahead.
City.
Oh.
Well, let's say if a student says city without, yeah.
Excellent. You know that city has these letters in it, but is that an ending to a word that changed the meaning? What's the meaning of s? Did I change the meaning of s anyway? No. So let's think of a word that has it where we're changing the meaning just a little bit by adding the suffix. Like if I am active, I might have an activity. If I want to be active, I might have an activity. Are you sure you want to take 5 or do you want to take another one?
No, let's take 12.
Oh, I was going to say, do you remember what was it? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn over 5 since that's what you said. The suffix is really an. The suffix is an, but it's often connected to the sh. So the suffix an actually refers to the person who, like American. But when we see words where the word ends with the C, the person who does it, like the person who does magic is a magician. The person who might plays music is a
Musician.
good. Can you think of any other words?
Politician.
Excellent. He's the person who's involved in politics. Excellent. So when the base word ended with the C, the person who does it, we end up using the CIAN, and the suffix is truly the AN, and this part just connects it.
So
okay.
Emily, real quick. So what we're doing is making lots of words and just identifying if they're like noun, adjective, verb, and making connections, or
I'm trying to teach along with it. So as the kids are playing a game and trying to beat the other kids, I'm going to teach about these parts and asking them to draw from memory, or at least getting them to recognize that, yeah, I've seen those words before. Yeah, I've seen that word before. Because the more they're able to say, oh, yeah, I've seen that. Oh, yeah, that's what it does. The better they're able to cement that knowledge in their own brain.
Got it.
Okay. Bernie, what do you want to go with?
13 and 7.
You sure you want me to go with 7?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Able means able to. Can you think of words that use that as a suffix?
Breakable.
Yeah, that means it's something that's able to be broken. I can break it, it's breakable. And it refers to make. So if I want to make the room dark, what will I do?
Darken.
Yeah, if I want to make the room light, what would I do?
Lighten.
Yeah, if I want to make my clothes soft, what do I do?
Soften.
Yeah, so E means, the EN means to make, right? So of course, kids are like, oh, we saw that there. And they go and they try to find, was it 3 or was it 5? Was it whatever? I don't care that they make a million mistakes. That just gives me more opportunity to talk about it. And it gives them more opportunity to pull from memory and recognition. Okay. So, Jackie, go for it.
22 and 6.
Okay. 22 meant.
Filament.
Excellent. It often is used to make a verb into a noun. Like if you and I argue, what are we having?
Argument.
Right. But if we agree on something, what do we do?
Agreement.
Yeah, we have an agreement. Has 2 meanings. Means the person who, like if I teach, I am a teacher. But it can also mean more. Like I'm short and, someone else is shorter, right? So it has 2 meanings. So you can see what I'm doing is I'm teaching and I'm asking the students to find recognition. And the more that they're able to say, oh yeah, I've seen that word, then the more they'll see it as they come to these multisyllabic words, and they'll notice the word parts. Right? Okay, Tani, go.
So did you want them to actually match what they see? Okay.
Yes, the idea is concentration.
Okay.
And then,
Okay.
I'm sorry. And then I keep score. It's like, oh, you've got one. Okay.
Okay, so 13. And I think it was 3.
Okay, let's see. Shucks. Go ahead. Tell me words for what you have here.
Okay,
This one means able to.
so did we say lovable for, did anyone say lovable?
You can say whatever you like. I like to give kids a list of common suffixes with their meaning and sample words. So the minimum to their list. But then I'm going to say, oh, let's try another word. What word would mean? And if I give them a base word and have them put it together with the suffix. So someone else said breakable, someone said lovable.
Doable?
Excellent. Yeah. And how about for itchy? So I had said earlier that if I had some actions, I might do an activity.
We already said community.
And I let kids say the same things again sometimes, and sometimes I'll try to help them find another word. Like you would know, if you're mobile, what do you have? You're mobile, you can move around. You have
Mobility.
right. So I might just cue kids in whatever's, might be relating it to stories we've read or other things that we've done, right? So the more recognition we bring. Shucks, that didn't work. Lori, find a pair.
Okay, I'm going to try 13 and 2.
Shucks, give me some words.
Okay. Movable.
Excellent. Able to be moved. Yes.
Transportation.
Excellent. That means the concept of transporting or moving things. Port means to carry. Trans means across. That means the concept of moving things across from one place to another. Transportation. Excellent work. So do you see what I'm doing here? So I give kids cheat sheets. I give kids a list of common prefixes, common suffixes with sample words, and then I'm going to try to build in. I do the same activity with prefixes as we go into prefixes, and I'll do the same type of activity with root words as we're introducing root words. So if it was when we get to root words, if the root was cred, you know, we'd have credible, incredible, credit, a credit, whatever, you know, at that level of work. And but suffixes is generally the first place we start because they've already been working on that in second grade, and you know, at least the S and the ing in first grade. They've been seeing them. They're aware that they're seeing them. So suffixes is the unlocks a lot. Okay. And then as you get more, you might bring in more suffixes and then prefixes and start noticing root words. And there's some excellent curriculum out where, you know, it's step by step. You're going to introduce these morphemes. And I don't know whether our school has any of them. I know that Wonders includes various suffixes as it does its word lists, but I have not seen any explicit instruction in the morphology. Anyway, so that was our quick break of demonstrating how we can use a game to improve engagement and to get just that recognition of what's happening. Yeah, I've seen those words. Okay. And the more they can say, yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, I know that word. The more that they'll then start seeing it in more places, which is what we want. We want that familiarity with the word parts. Okay. Any questions so far? Time are we? Good.
What grade is that appropriate for, or what age, that game?
I've done it from third grade on up. Okay. I do something else with my second graders where I have them add suffixes onto words and tell me how the spelling changes. You know what? I'll pull that up after break. But for grade level grade level work, definitely third grade. I'd start working on this. And if you have kids that aren't at this level, because they're still trying to read gull, you know, might not quite be ready for this. But actually, even a lot of those are, because a lot of those kids have memorized the sight words. And so building that oral language recognition that those suffixes exist is still appropriate. Asking them to read the word with it, you know, the other skills first. Okay. Are we okay here? Any other questions? Yay. Okay. So we spoke very quickly yesterday about steps for steps for decoding multisyllabic words. We're going to talk more about that. And I gave you, right, did I give you the link to the spelling rules and that document? Were any of you able to pull it up? And so we have it. We might refer to that. Want to keep it to the side. Refer to that occasionally as we talk about the decoding. We do need to teach the spelling rules, but we can't say, I'm going to teach you all the spelling rules before I go forward. That doesn't happen. So you teach spelling rules, you teach them explicitly, you practice them, and you reinforce them as you go on. I don't know that it makes sense for our struggling readers to say, we're not doing multisyllabic words until you've learned all of these spelling rules. Because sometimes that, you know, we can reinforce the spelling rule as we deal with multisyllabic words. So yesterday morning when I started by saying I want to respect the student and where they are, I don't want to just start with words like dog and cat. I want to give them the longer words, give them the ability to read the longer words, and we're going to practice those spelling rules and reinforce those spelling rules in more age-appropriate word work, so they can feel proud of themselves. So last year, at the end of last year, I got to work with 2 of our students who were Tier 3 students for reading. And you know, they put on the bravado. Yeah, it's okay, I'm cool. And but you know, it doesn't feel good knowing that you can't read as well as the other kids. And by working with this multisyllabic words and reinforcing the spelling rules as we're going through words that were appropriate for them, and I actually used kind of tough words because I felt like these kids really needed that boost. You know, at one point, one student says to the other, he's like, "Oh, we should have been in the spelling bee." I mean, can you imagine for those kids that you know who I'm talking about, the Tier 3 kids, the ones that are really struggling, and to like, "Oh, I would have done better than some of those other guys in the spelling bee." The ones that would never have attempted the spelling bee because, or you know, it's so wonderful to give them that boost in morale, and it's not just the affirmation. You know, we can't just go around saying, "Oh, you're smart, you'll get it, you're good." When they start to feel successful and when they start to feel accomplished, that's the worthwhile thing, right? It's not just us saying it, it's for them to actually feel it. So we're going to go into decoding multisyllabic words, but if you've had a chance to look over the spelling rules, is there anything in there that's not one that you have been teaching, know about, familiar with in what you've already done? And I'm going to put it up on the screen and we can just take a quick look through and just see. I don't want to try to teach each one right now, but I just want to see, you know, are you fairly familiar with these? So let's start up here with here in spelling rules. Every syllable needs a vowel. We're good, right? Q always needs a U. We're good on that. We use a K to spell in front of E, I, or Y. And the convention is that if you want the sound is within the slash marks. Okay, so anything within the slash marks refers to the sound of that letter. Because I'm not going to use IPA and I don't have the ability to type it and it's like weird. So sound inside the slash marks. So if we want to spell the k sound in front of E, I, or Y, we have to use a K. Why? Because the C would say S, right? We often use the single vowel to spell the long sounds at the end of a syllable. So where we would teach that if the syllable ends with a vowel, the A, E, O, U, say the long sounds, and I and Y can be either sound that I mentioned yesterday. English words do not ever end in I, U, V, or J, except for the word you and I, because you and I are special, we're exceptional. And then words that come to us from another language like ski or poi, right? So we don't end a word with J, so that's why we have the other spellings, the GE, the DGE. And then we often double FL and S. Are we familiar with these? Give me a nod or a thumbs up You guys are pretty much familiar with this. The I and the O may be used to spell the capital letters refer to the long sounds, I and O, like in kind and old. And then to spell the J at the end of a base word, we use the DG after a single short vowel. Otherwise, we use the GE. So we use badge, we use the DGE after the A, but we use the GE after a consonant or after a long vowel, huge. Okay. This one down here, these here, are the ones that may be more unusual to you. To spell the sh at the beginning of a word, we use the SH, but we use the TICI or SI to spell sh at the beginning of any other syllable. Nation, action, precious, delicious. Whenever you hear the sh at the beginning of any syllable except for the first one, we have to use these. I find that this rule has very rarely been taught in school kids. They're just taught to read the word nation, action, right, or delicious. So let's teach that rule explicitly. Because how many times do you see kids and they're going to spell, they can read action and they can read nation, but they go to spell it and they use a SH because they're listening to the sound. And it's good to listen to the sound, but let's go ahead and explicitly teach this rule. This is one rule that I find is often neglected. Okay, so based on these rules, some rules you just need to look up. It's not worth trying to memorize the rule. Can I make this larger? Sorry, I should have thought of doing that. It's not worth looking up whether you use a S, a CE, SE, Z at the end of a word. Some of them, if you don't know, just look it up. I'm still sitting there, okay, was that a SE or a CE at the end of that word? This happens because I see so much misspelling, things no longer look right anymore. I have to look things up, and it's okay. And is it an ant or an ence? And the KLE at the end of the word, CLE, KLE, CKLE, you know what? Just tell the kid to look it up. Ask Siri. I'm not going to say, well, 70% of the time in this instance, you're going to use this, but in this instance, it's going to be 60% of the time you'll use this. It's like, oh, come on. Just look it up. It's faster. That's my view. Okay. So if you're fairly familiar with most of these, look at what happens with suffixes. And these are the three great rules. I call it the three great rules. 1-1-1 rule. And that's just a term we use, but when a one-syllable word ends with one vowel and one consonant, you double the last consonant before adding a vowel suffix. So when you have pin and you want to make pinning, you have to double it, double the N. Or if I have star, I have one vowel, one consonant, I double the R before I add my vowel suffix. So kids are usually taught this back in second grade. It's good to keep that in your memory. Right? Second grade, I think. Anyone? And that also happens if a two-syllable word is, basically it happens if the two-syllable word has a prefix on it. The kids might not recognize it as a prefix. So if you say, if the second syllable is louder, and some of our kids can't tell that they're stressing the second syllable, and it's extremely difficult for dyslexic kids to tell you where the stress is on a syllable. That's one of the hardest things. Some of those things, you just tell them, okay, that one, just look it up. It's okay. And I can work with a dyslexic child to help them realize where the stress is, but it's very difficult. This rule, I wouldn't worry too much about. Sometimes you just have to look it up. But up here, so I tell the kids if it's got one vowel, one consonant, and you're adding a vowel suffix, double that consonant. If it's two vowels or two consonants, don't worry about it. Okay, one vowel, one consonant, you double the consonant. Okay, why does this matter? It matters for reading, and I'm going to show why it matters for reading. We get to the silent E rule. The silent final E words commonly lose the E when you add a vowel suffix. So hope, when I want to go to hoping, I drop the E. But I keep it in front of a consonant suffix, so it's hopeless, the E stays there. And love becomes lovable, drop the E, but the E stays there for lovely. So this is why we have to know what's a vowel and what's a consonant. So you know when to apply these rules. But be careful if the word ends with a CE or a GE. Outrage, right? If I say I'm outraged at this, I can drop the E and add on my ED. But what happens if I want to say that's outrageous? I have to keep the E because of that other rule. If I drop that E, the G would then say G. Because G can only say J if the next letter is an E, I, or Y. So it's not outrageous. I have to keep the E so I can still say outrageous. And same thing here, notice. I dropped the E for noticing, but noticeable, I have to keep the E so it doesn't become noticeable. Okay. So I know that's a lot to process right now, but just do you see how these rules apply to the spelling of the words? So some of these rules we just have to learn, we have to practice. That's part of the content of what we can explicitly teach. And I practice them, but none of us gets to mastery right away. We still sit there and say, oh, wait, you know, I have to double that letter, or oh, wait, that one still needs the E. It's okay. And then this rule, the single vowel Y changes to an I when you add any suffix unless the suffix begins with an I. If the suffix begins with the I, keep the Y, because English words do not have double I's except for the word skiing, because that was not originally English. Okay, so baby, change the Y to an I when you make it babies. Funny, change the Y to the I when you add est, funniest, or funnier. But cry, so cry, I change the Y to an I when it becomes cried. But if I'm crying, I can't have the two I's together, the Y stays. Now here, enjoy, it looks like it ends with a Y, right? The Y doesn't change because it's not a all by itself Y. It's part of the digraph OY, saying oi. So I don't change that, right? But even in beauty, the Y becomes an I when we go to beautiful. Okay, so I know that's a lot to process, and that's why you keep your cheat sheet and you say, oh yeah, that's right, that's this rule. And most of you do this automatically without thinking about it. But our students often need that explicit instruction. So I know when you do things automatically, it's hard to go back to, why did that happen? Why am I doing this? So this is the reference, okay? The reason this is really important is that we teach the kids to spell, and we should, but they also have to be able to read the words. And I can't tell you how many kids, let me just see if I can show it from here. Here, I'm going to share from this. I have to stop share here, sorry. And I'm going to. Why, share screen, there it is. Please let me know when it pops up. Sometimes I don't see it pop up. Is it popping up? Okay. All right. So this word is on some standardized test. I don't remember which test it's on, but I've seen kids misread it so many times. Okay. You know the word. But we'll have kids who'll come up and say, and they're trying to, constant, and they say, management, 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 and they're pronouncing the E. And this time after time after time. So familiarity with suffixes and familiarity with working with the spelling rules, because once I say, okay, here's my suffix, an E, remember I dropped the E in front of a vowel suffix? Well, that means it stays in front of a consonant suffix. What's this E here doing? And if the second they cover that suffix and they say, oh yeah, the E is making the G say J, then they say management. But some kids have to be explicitly taught these things. They don't just see it, right? So knowing the spelling rules allows us to explicitly teach how it impacts our decoding. So spelling rules, of course, that's encoding. Yes, that gives you the correct means to encode a word. Am I dropping the E? Am I keeping the E? Am I doubling a letter? But it gives us the ability to decode. And I show these words all the time. Okay. And I can tell you a lot of kids will say filling for either one of them. So when we look at it and we can explicitly teach, you identify your suffix. The word was fill. If you see two consonants in front of your vowel suffix, you either doubled it or it was already there. Here's my suffix here, same suffix. If you see only one consonant in front of your vowel suffix, the silent E was dropped. Because if there had only been one consonant at the end of the word, you would have doubled it. So if there's one consonant in front of your vowel suffix, the silent E was dropped, and the word was file, the filing. So this word and this word, we can explicitly teach in our spelling rules and in our encoding. If I want hop-ing, if I want to add an ing to it, I have a one vowel, one consonant. I have to double the P before I add my ing. But here, if I want to add an ing, if I want to add the ing, let's look at it. Silent final E words commonly lose the E when you add a vowel suffix. So I need to take this out here. Gone. And I need to stick this over here. There we go. So we can teach our students to spell that, but they also have to be able to read it. The fact that they know the rules to apply it for spelling doesn't mean that they read it accurately. We have to explicitly teach the inverse operation. So here's my suffix. Oops, sorry. Here's my suffix. I see two consonants in front of it. That meant that I doubled it, right? The word is hopping. Or you can just say I doubled it and kind of cover up the whole ing, the extra P in the ing and read the base word as hop, hopping. Here, I have a vowel suffix. There's only one P in front of it. That means our silent E was dropped. So the word was hope. Now, as I was teaching yesterday about if there's two consonants between your vowels, split between them, but if there's one consonant, you generally split in front. So I could teach it like saying, here's my vowel, I'm splitting between the two consonants. Here's my vowel, I can split it there, hoping. I could do that. I have been preferring to teach what happened based on working backwards from the spelling rules. How did those spelling rules apply to the word? Because I want them to see the concept of hope, that the silent E was dropped. I don't want them to just have to hear ho, ping. Right? I want to connect it to the meaning of hope. So while I could follow the generalization I showed you yesterday, I prefer to teach this part of working with the suffixes by looking at how did those spelling rules impact the spelling of these words, and how do I use that to go back to what the original word was, the base word, get to the base word, get to the meaning. That makes sense? Right. So I see this all the time. You know, we have tilling and tiling. We have all sorts of words that kids will read it one way and it's like, oh, wait, that didn't make sense. And then they have to go back and reread the sentence. Or what actually happens for a lot of our students is they're used to things not making sense. So they just keep going on, even though the sentence that they read made no sense at all. They've become used to words not making sense. And we want to get away from that. We want our words to make sense. Okay. It is time for a quick break. How much time do you want? And if you pulled up, let me stop share. All right. So if you pulled up words yesterday, if you could, how do you want to show them to me? Okay, first of all, did anyone pull up words for us to decode? Yes. Okay, do you want to put them in chat? Do you want to just wait and I'll just ask you to type them in, or whatever? You want to just type them into chat real quick? Is that an easy
Whichever you
thing?
prefer is fine, whichever you prefer.
Okay, let's put it in chat, and then I'll just write it out here for everyone to see, because I know not everyone has the ability to write on it. Okay, so take a couple of minutes, type them into chat, and then take a 5-minute break. Let's come back at 9:50. Does that work? Is that enough time to take a quick break? Okay, great. And oh, please tell me I'm recording. Yes.